The weight of my life crushed me at 53. Years of relentless toil for the Thompson family drained every ounce of my strength, and I collapsed, dying a week before my birthday in 2025. My body, worn thin from endless cooking, cleaning, and catering to their demands, gave out in our modest Ohio home. My husband, Robert Thompson, a college professor with a charming smile and a scholar's poise, didn't mourn me. Within a year, he held a lavish wedding at the Cleveland Country Club, marrying his high school sweetheart, Laura Jenkins. Their vows echoed through a hall adorned with roses paid for by my parents' savings. My son, Ethan, just 23, stood by his side, calling Laura Mom, with a grin that pierced my soul. My in-laws, Margaret and George, beamed, welcoming her as their true daughter-in-law, as if I'd never existed. Their social media new in 2025 flaunted their happiness. Photos of Robert and Laura on a Caribbean honeymoon, sipping cocktails under palm trees, flooded my old friends' feeds. The house they lived in, a sprawling 4-bedroom my parents gifted us, was my legacy, yet no one mentioned my name. Every penny they spent Laura's designer dresses, Ethan's new car came from my family's wealth. I was the wife who scrubbed floors, balanced budgets, and sacrificed dreams. But I was erased. Only my daughter, Emily, 25, and newly married, remembered me. I watched a silent spirit as she knelt by my grave in a quiet Cleveland cemetery, wiping dust from my tombstone. Her tears fell and she whispered, "Mom, I wish I'd told you I loved you more." I'd neglected her in life, favoring Ethan under the Thompsons' pressure to prioritize boys, a remnant of our small town's 1990s values. Regret consumed me. Why had I poured my life into a family that discarded me? Why did I distance myself from my parents, Tom and Linda, who loved me unconditionally? As Emily's hand brushed my name, Chloe Marie Davis, a celestial light enveloped me. A warm yet vast voice spoke. Your heart was true, but your path was not. Rewrite your story. The light pulsed, and I felt my soul pulled backward through time. When my eyes opened, I was in my old bedroom, the air heavy with the scent of lavender from a 1990s air freshener. The calendar on the wall read July 1995. I was 23 again, my body young but weak from a fever. Heaven had granted me a second chance. The room was familiar, a cramped space in the Thompsons' apartment assigned to us because Robert insisted his aging parents deserved the main bedroom. The peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards reminded me of my past life's compromises. In the 1990s, Ohio was a place of transition factories, closing families clinging to traditional roles. Women like me with only a high school diploma were expected to be homemakers, not question their husbands. Robert, a rising star at Cleveland State University, had swept me off my feet with his intellect. I met him at 18, dazzled by his lectures on literature, believing his promises of a shared future. But beneath his charm lay a subtle disdain for my uneducated roots, a bias he hid behind polite smiles. His parents, Margaret and George, reinforced it, calling my family new money with no class, despite living off my parents' generosity. I sat up, my head spinning, and saw Emily, just 10, peeking through the door. Her ponytail bounced, her eyes wide with worry. "Mom, you okay?" she asked, clutching a glass of water. In my past life, I'd ignored her, scolding her for small mistakes while showering Ethan with toys and attention. The Thompsons favored boys, a cultural norm in our town, where sons carried the family name. I'd internalized it, neglecting Emily's gentle soul. Now seeing her care for me, guilt flooded my heart. I wouldn't repeat those mistakes. I'd protect Emily, Ethan, and my parents from the Thompsons' greed. As I steadied myself, a memory surfaced: my parents' rental property, a 4-bedroom house in a prime Cleveland suburb. In my past life, Robert's family manipulated me into giving it to them, leaving my parents with nothing. This time I'd use it to secure my children's future. I knew the 2000s real estate boom was coming. My rebirth gave me that foresight. I'd guide my parents to invest, ensuring our independence. But first I needed to escape this toxic home. I hugged Emily, promising silently to be the mother she deserved. As I did, I imagined sharing this story on a platform like YouTube, where people connect over tales of redemption. If this journey moves you, hit that like button, drop a comment about your own second chances, and subscribe to follow my path. It's just beginning. I stood weak but resolute, ready to rewrite my life, starting with the family that had broken me. The summer sun filtered through the faded curtains of our small apartment in Parma, Ohio, casting soft shadows on the worn carpet. It was July 1995 when kids rode bikes until dusk and families gathered around bulky TVs for Seinfeld reruns. My fever lingered, my body aching, but my mind was sharp, fueled by the clarity of my rebirth. I was Chloe Davis, 23, no longer the exhausted woman who died at 53. The celestial voice's promise echoed in my heart, rewrite your story. I looked at Emily, my 10-year-old daughter, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her brown eyes scanning me with concern. "Mom, you're finally awake," she said, her voice soft like a summer breeze. "I gave you some Tylenol to bring your fever down." Emily's face, so like mine with its high cheekbones, stirred a pang of guilt. In my past life, I'd been a terrible mother to her. Influenced by the Thompsons' old-fashioned belief that boys were the future, I'd given Ethan, my 8-year-old son, everything: new toys, clothes, my undivided attention. Emily got hand-me-down scoldings in a corner of the living room to play quietly with broken dolls. The 1990s Midwest clung to such gender norms, especially in our working-class town, where men worked factory jobs or taught at colleges like Robert, while women like me were expected to serve. I'd grown up pampered by my parents, Tom and Linda, in their comfortable Cleveland home, yet I adopted the Thompsons' bias after marriage, betraying Emily and myself. I reached for her hand, my voice trembling. "Emily, I'm so sorry for how I've treated you. You're so kind and I've been unfair. From now on, Mommy will love you with all her heart." Her eyes widened, unsure, then she smiled, a spark of hope. "Really? Can I have my own toys, not just Ethan's old ones?" My throat tightened. How could I have denied her such simple joys? "Yes, sweetheart, you'll have new dresses, toys, everything. You're my princess." She hugged me, her small body warm against mine, and I felt her trust, fragile but growing. I glanced around the room, the reality of 1995 sinking in. No smartphones, just a clunky landline on the nightstand. The radio played Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, a reminder of the era's raw energy. My husband Robert was at the university, and his career as a literature professor was on the rise. I'd fallen for him at 18, a shy high school graduate attending his open lecture. His eloquence and confidence captivated me, but now I saw the cracks: his subtle scorn for my lack of a degree, his dismissal of my parents as new money contractors. He'd promised to make them proud, but it was a lie to keep me compliant. His parents, Margaret and George, lived with us, occupying the main bedroom, while we squeezed into this tiny space with Emily and Ethan. They relied on my parents' wealth, a rental property, savings from my dad's construction business, yet mocked them as unrefined. Emily's voice broke my thoughts. "Mom, are you feeling better? I was scared when you wouldn't wake up." Her concern mirrored the care she showed at my grave in 2025, and I fought back tears. "I'm okay, thanks to you," I said, stroking her hair. "Emily, what's it like when I'm not around? Do Grandma Margaret and Grandpa George treat you okay?" She hesitated, then whispered, "They're mean sometimes. Grandma yells if I touch Ethan's toys, and Grandpa says I'm too loud. I don't like being here." Her words confirmed my suspicions. In my past life, I ignored signs of their cruelty, too busy pleasing Robert. Now I saw how they'd poisoned our home. I stood shaky but determined and packed a small bag. "We're going to Grandma Linda and Grandpa Tom's house," I told Emily. Her face lit up. "Really, they're so lovely. They give me candy and let me play in their garden." My parents' love for Emily had been unwavering even when I pushed them away in my past life, believing Robert's family was my priority. Unlike the suffocating apartment, their 2-story home in a Cleveland suburb was a haven. The Thompsons wouldn't notice our absence, they barely acknowledged Emily. Robert was likely at the university, charming colleagues, while Ethan was with his grandparents, their golden child. As we prepared to leave, I thought of my next steps. Divorce was rare in 1995 in Ohio, especially for a woman with limited education, but my rebirth gave me an edge. I knew the housing market would soar in the 2000s. My parents' rental property could secure our future if I guided them to invest wisely. I'd need evidence against Robert, maybe his infidelity with Laura, which I suspected even now. At the library, I'd research divorce laws, learning fault-based grounds like adultery could strengthen my case. I needed to protect Emily and reconnect with Ethan before the Thompsons' influence ruined him. Holding Emily's hand, I stepped into the warm July evening, the sound of cicadas guiding us toward freedom. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cramped apartment in Parma, Ohio, where the air smelled faintly of stale coffee and Margaret's overpowering rose perfume. It was July 1995 when suburban life revolved around block parties and AM radio hits like Hootie and the Blowfish. My fever lingered, making my limbs heavy, but my resolve was ironclad, forged by the celestial voice that had sent me back 30 years to rewrite my story. I sat on the edge of the bed, Emily's small hand in mine, her ponytail swaying as she watched me with worry. At 10, she was already more caretaker than child, a role I'd forced on her in my past life, by neglecting her for my son Ethan and the Thompson family's demands. That ended now. The bedroom door slammed open, jolting Emily. My mother-in-law, Margaret Thompson, stood in the doorway, her permed hair framing a scowl and still lying around with that fever, Chloe. It's nearly 500 p.m. Robert's due home from the university, and you haven't even started dinner. Her voice dripped with disdain, a tone I'd once endured silently. In the 1990s, women like me, high school graduates married into respectable families, were expected to cook, clean, and obey, especially in conservative towns like ours. Margaret, a former seamstress who prided herself on her son's academic success, saw me beneath her despite my parents' wealth funding their comfortable life. Emily flinched, her body tensing against mine, a silent testament to Margaret's cruelty when I wasn't around. In my past life, I'd ignored such signs, too busy pleasing Robert and his parents. I saw the fear in Emily's eyes and felt a surge of defiance. "I'm sick, Margaret," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I'm not cooking tonight." Her eyes widened, unaccustomed to my resistance. In my previous life, I'd swallowed every insult, cooked through fevers, and let her belittle my new money family no more. Margaret's lips curled. "You're a Thompson now, Chloe. It's your duty to care for us. What kind of wife lets her in-laws starve over a bit of cold?" Her words echoed the era's expectations. Women were homemakers, their worth tied to service. But I knew their comfort came from my parents' savings, not Robert's modest professor's salary. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "If you're so worried about dinner, Margaret, why don't you and George take Ethan to eat? I'd hate for you to catch my germs." I'd learned in my past life that Margaret was a hypochondriac, terrified of illness due to her high blood pressure. Her face paled, and she stepped back, clutching her cardigan. "Why didn't you say so?" she snapped, retreating to the door. "Stay in here, then. We don't need your flu. George and I will take Ethan to the diner." "That girl's been with you all day. She's probably infected, too. Let her stay." Her venom toward Emily, calling her that girl, ignited a fire in me. I wanted to confront her, to expose her cruelty, but I held back. My rebirth gave me clarity. Direct fights wouldn't win this war. I needed a strategy. As Margaret stormed out, slamming the door, Emily whispered, "Mom, I don't want to leave you. I'll stay and take care of you." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce with loyalty. I hugged her tightly, her small frame stiff at first, then melting into me. "You're so brave, sweetheart," I said. "We'll stay here together, just you and me." From the living room, I heard Margaret's voice, sharp and bitter. "George, call Robert. Tell him his wife's too sick to cook. He can eat out too," acting like she's on her deathbed. The front door slammed, and the apartment fell silent. I looked at Emily, her face a mix of relief and fear. "Emily, has Grandma Margaret always been like this to you?" I asked gently. She nodded, twisting her fingers. "She yells if I play too loudly or touch Ethan's toys. She says I'm a bother, not like Ethan. He's their favorite." Her words cut deep, confirming the neglect I'd ignored in my past life. Margaret and George had doted on Ethan, reinforcing the town's bias toward boys as heirs, while dismissing Emily as disposable, a girl who'd marry out someday. I'd been complicit, favoring Ethan with new clothes and toys, while Emily played with his cast-offs. "I'm so sorry, Emily," I said, my voice breaking. "I was wrong to let them treat you that way. From now on, you're my priority. No one will hurt you again." Her eyes lit up, a smile breaking through. "You mean it, Mom? Can I have my own room like Ethan?" I nodded, envisioning my parents' four-bedroom house, a rental property the Thompsons coveted in my past life. "I promised you'll have the prettiest room with all the toys you want." She hugged me, her trust a fragile gift I'd never betray again. As Emily rested against me, I planned my next move. The Thompsons relied on my parents' wealth. My dad's construction business had paid for this apartment, their car, even Robert's suits. Yet they mocked my family as uneducated. In 1995, divorce was daunting, especially for a woman with no college degree in a town where judges favored men. But my rebirth gave me an edge. I knew Robert's flaws, including his growing interest in Laura Jenkins, his high school sweetheart. I'd start gathering evidence, maybe hiring a private investigator through my dad. I'd take Emily to my parents' house where she could heal. Ethan needed saving too. He was only 8, still moldable, not yet the spoiled man who'd called Laura mom. I'd bring him to my parents soon, breaking the Thompsons' hold. The 1990s world outside buzzed with life kids on bikes, payphones ringing, but inside I was forging a new path where my children and I would be free. The taxi pulled up to my parents' two-story house in a quiet Cleveland suburb, its white picket fence glowing under the July 1995 sun. The neighborhood was a snapshot of the era station wagons in driveways, kids playing kickball, and the faint hum of a lawnmower. Emily clutched my hand, her small suitcase bouncing as we stepped onto the gravel path. My fever had eased, but my heart raced with anticipation. In my past life, I'd distanced myself from my parents, Tom and Linda, to please Robert and his family. They'd called my parents new money, sneering at their contractor wealth, and I'd foolishly believed them visiting only rarely, despite their love for me and Emily. Now reborn, I saw the truth. My parents were my strength, and this house was our sanctuary. Emily ran ahead, her ponytail swinging. "Grandma, Grandpa," she called, bursting through the front door. My mother, Linda, still in her early 50s, with auburn hair and a warm smile, scooped her up. "My precious girl, what brings you here?" she said, her eyes scanning Emily's thin frame. "You're too skinny, sweetheart. Has Margaret been keeping food from you again?" My father. Tom appeared from the backyard, wiping dirt from his hands, his flannel shirt stained from gardening. At 55, he was strong, his face weathered but kind. In my past life, I'd neglected them, missing my dad's cancer diagnosis and my mom's depression after his death. Their love for Emily had been unwavering, even giving her an apartment for her wedding when I'd failed to provide a dowry. Seeing them, my emotions broke free. I rushed to my mother, hugging her tightly. "Mom, I missed you so much," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm so glad you're okay. I'll take care of you and Dad from now on." Linda stiffened, surprised, then hugged me back. "Chloe, what's wrong?" "You're shaking," my father's voice boomed from the doorway. "Who's hurt my girl? I'll march over to that Thompson house right now." He brandished a garden shovel, his protective instinct fierce. I'd grown distant from him in my past life, arguing over Robert's family, whom he called pretentious leeches. Now I saw his clarity. I wiped my eyes, calming them. "It's just the fever, Dad. And Emily missed you both." I didn't want to worry them, but my resolve was firm. I'd never return to the Thompsons' apartment. Emily chimed in, her voice bright. "Grandma, Grandpa, I love coming here. You let me play in the garden and give me cookies." Linda laughed, ruffling her hair. "You're our sunshine, Emily. Stay as long as you want." Their warmth contrasted with the Thompsons' coldness, and I knew I'd made the right choice. I reflected on my plan as we settled in the cozy living room with its floral couch and old Zenith TV. The Thompsons had bled my parents dry in my past life, taking their 4-bedroom rental house and savings. In 1995, that house was still theirs, a valuable asset in a market I knew would boom by the 2000s. My rebirth gave me foresight. I'd urge my parents to invest in more properties, securing our future. Divorce was my goal, but Ohio's laws favored men unless I could prove Robert's fault, like infidelity with Laura. I'd visit the library tomorrow to research legal options and local investigators. My parents' financial support would be key. They'd offered to help in my past life, but I'd refused, blinded by loyalty to Robert. That night, as Emily slept in the guest room, I sat with my parents at their oak kitchen table, the scent of coffee filling the air. "Mom, Dad," I said, "I'm thinking of leaving Robert. It's not working, and Emily's suffering." Linda reached for my hand. "Chloe, you're our only daughter. We want you to be happy. We've got savings enough to support you and the kids." Tom nodded. "If you're ready to walk away, we've got your back. That Thompson family's no good for you." Their trust fueled me. I'd bring Ethan here soon before Margaret and George twisted him further. He was only 8, still salvageable, unlike the man he'd become. I glanced out the window at the quiet street, where fireflies blinked in the dusk. The 1990s were simpler, no social media, just neighbors chatting on porches. But for me, it was a battlefield. I'd protect my children, reclaim my parents' love, and dismantle the Thompsons' hold. With its creaky floors and warm memories, this house was my starting point. Tomorrow I'd begin gathering evidence against Robert, setting the stage for our freedom. The morning light streamed through the lace curtains of my parents' Cleveland home, painting the oak kitchen table with soft patterns. It was July 1995 when Ohio suburbs buzzed with the hum of lawn mowers and kids' laughter, a world of Walkmans and Blockbuster rentals. I sipped coffee, and my fever was finally gone, replaced by a clarity of my rebirth. The celestial voice that sent me back 30 years echoed in my mind. Rewrite your story. Emily, my 10-year-old daughter, slept upstairs safe in my parents' guest room, her face peaceful after years of neglect in my past life. I'd vowed to protect her and my 8-year-old son Ethan from the Thompson family's toxicity. With its creaky floors and scent of my mom's baking, this house was my sanctuary to plan our escape. In my past life, I died at 53, worn out from serving my husband, Robert Thompson, and his parents, Margaret and George. They'd bled my parents' wealth savings from my dad's construction business and a 4-bedroom rental house while mocking them as new money. Robert, a literature professor at Cleveland State University, had charmed me at 18 with his intellect, but his subtle disdain for my lack of a college degree grew over time. His parents reinforced it, favoring Ethan as the family's heir while dismissing Emily as a girl who'd marry out. I'd been complicit, prioritizing Ethan's needs, leaving Emily with hand-me-downs and scoldings. My rebirth allowed me to right those wrongs, but it required strategy. Divorce in 1995 in Ohio was a steep climb. The legal system favored men, especially respectable ones like Robert, unless I could prove fault, adultery, cruelty, or neglect. I suspected Robert was already drawn to Laura Jenkins, his high school sweetheart, whose delicate beauty and college education matched his self-image as an intellectual. In my past life, he married her a year after my death, living off my parents' wealth. I'd need evidence of his infidelity to secure custody of Emily and Ethan. My parents, Tom and Linda, offered unwavering support. Last night over dinner, my dad had said, "Chloe, if you want out, we've got savings. You and the kids will be fine." My mom nodded, her eyes soft. "We want you happy, sweetheart." I opened the Cleveland Plain Dealer, scanning the classifieds for private investigators. My dad's construction contacts could recommend someone discreet to track Robert's movements. I also needed to secure our financial future. My rebirth gave me foresight. The 2000s real estate boom was coming. My parents' 4-bedroom house in a prime suburb was worth $200,000 now, but would triple in value by 2010. I'd urged them to invest in more properties, leveraging their savings and my dad's business acumen. This currently rented house could be ours if I played my cards right. The Thompsons coveted it, but I'd ensure it stayed under my control, perhaps in Ethan's name, to appease them temporarily. Emily bounded downstairs, her ponytail bouncing. "Mom, can we stay here forever?" she asked, her eyes bright. I smiled, hiding my plans. "We'll be here a while, sweetheart. How do you feel about that?" She hugged me. "I love it here. Grandma lets me help in the garden, and Grandpa doesn't yell like Grandma Margaret." Her words stung. Margaret's cruelty had left scars I'd ignored in my past life. "You're safe here," I promised. "And we'll get Ethan soon, okay?" She nodded, but her face clouded. "Ethan's different now. He's mean sometimes, like Grandma says I'm a bother." I hugged her tighter. Ethan was still young, moldable. I'd bring him here to break Margaret's influence. I drove to the local library, a brick building filled with the hum of microfiche machines and the scent of old books. The 1990s lacked Google, so I pored over legal books, learning that Ohio's divorce laws required grounds like adultery for a favorable ruling. A librarian, a kind woman in her 60s, pointed me to a guide on custody battles. "You're smart to research," she said. "Courts here don't make it easy for women." I also found a phone book listing investigators. One, Mike Callahan, had a reputation for discretion. I jotted down his number, planning to ask my dad to hire him. I outlined my strategy at my parents' house: gather evidence against Robert, secure the house for the kids, and guide my parents' investments. The Thompsons wouldn't know what hit them. My parents joined me on the porch as evening fell, fireflies flickering in the yard. "Chloe, my mom said you're different, stronger. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I'm leaving Robert. He's not who I thought, and the kids deserve better." My dad clenched his fist. "That's the family's trouble. We'll back you no matter what." Their support was my anchor. I'd return to the Thompsons' apartment soon, not to stay, but to confront them and bring Ethan to safety. The 1990s world, simple, slow, with corded phones and cassette tapes, felt like a fresh canvas. I was ready to paint a new future where my children and I would thrive. The Thompsons' apartment in Parma smelled of Margaret's cooking oil and cigarette smoke, starkly contrasting my parents' warm home. It was late July 1995, and the Cleveland suburbs buzzed with summer fairs and radio ads for Batman Forever. I stepped through the door with the suitcase in hand. Emily was safe with my parents. My fever was gone, replaced by a steely resolve from my rebirth. The celestial voice's command, "Rewrite your story," pulsed in my veins. I'd return to face Robert and his parents not as the submissive wife of my past life, but as a woman with a plan. My goal: secure my children's future, expose Robert's flaws, and escape his family's grip. Robert wasn't home likely at the university, charming colleagues with his professor's charisma. In my past life, I died at 53, exhausted from serving the Thompsons, who lived off my parents' wealth while mocking them as new money. Robert, 26 and ambitious, had swept me off my feet at 18 with his lectures on Shakespeare. I was a high school graduate, dazzled by his degree and promises of a grand future. But his charm hid a calculating side. He dismissed my parents' contractor success as crude, believing his academic status elevated him. His parents, Margaret and George, reinforced this, occupying the main bedroom while we crammed into a small room with Emily and Ethan. Margaret greeted me with a sneer. "Back from your little getaway, Chloe. I thought you'd run off for good." Her voice dripped with venom, a reminder of her cruelty in my past life. I ignored her, setting my suitcase down. Ethan, 8, was at the community center with Robert, their golden boy. In my past life, I'd spoiled him, giving him toys and attention, while Emily got scraps shaped by the Thompsons' bias toward boys, a common mindset in 1990s Ohio, where sons were seen as legacy carriers. I'd failed both children, but Ethan was still young, not yet the man who'd called Laura mom after my death. Robert returned at sunset, his tie loosened, his scholarly air intact. He didn't ask about Emily or my absence. Instead, he leaned against the kitchen counter, his voice smooth. "Chloe, did you talk to your dad about the house? Ethan needs his own room, and my parents' knees can't handle stairs." The 4-bedroom rental home owned by my parents was his obsession. In my past life, he'd manipulated me into giving it to his family, leaving my parents destitute. I saw his greed clearly. His concern for Ethan and his parents was a ploy to control my family's wealth. I met his gaze, my voice firm. "My dad will give us the house, but it's in Ethan's name, and you will pay $50,000 for renovations." Robert's face twisted in shock. 50 grand? That's wild. And why Ethan's name? Emily's a girl she'll marry and give it away. His words exposed his bias, rooted in the era's patriarchal norms. In 1995, women were often seen as temporary family members, and their value was tied to marriage. I'd once accepted this, distancing myself from my parents to please him. Not anymore. "Don't you care where I've been?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Emily's with my parents." "Didn't you notice she was gone?" Robert's expression stiffened, then softened into a practiced concern. "Is she okay? Did she act up again? I'll talk to her when she's back." His dismissal of Emily, calling her a problem, echoed his past life neglect. I pressed on. "My parents love Ethan, but want the house in his name to protect him. It's worth $200,000. $50,000 is a steal. If you don't like it, Dad's friend will buy it at market price." Panic flashed in Robert's eyes. "No, don't sell it. I'll talk to my parents." He rushed to their room, closing the door. I overheard Margaret's sharp voice. 50,000. "That's robbery," George grumbled. "Why a kid's name? It should be ours." Their greed was predictable. I'd learned in my past life that Margaret had an affair years ago, a scandal that shamed George. I could use that to unsettle her later. For now, I focused on Ethan. He returned from the center, clutching a comic book, his eyes bright but guarded. I'd indulged him in my past life, creating a spoiled man. Now I saw a chance to save him. I knelt beside him. "Ethan, how's it going with Grandma and Grandpa Thompson?" He shrugged. "They give me candy but say mean things about Grandma Linda and Grandpa Tom. They say they're not smart like you and Dad." My heart sank. Margaret was poisoning him against my parents, just as she'd done to Emily. "Want to visit them with Emily?" I asked. His face lit up, then dimmed. "Grandma Margaret says they don't like me, only Emily." I hugged him. "They love you, buddy. They've got new toys waiting." He smiled, a spark of the boy he could be. I planned my next steps. My dad had hired Mike Callahan, a private investigator, to track Robert. I suspected he was meeting Laura, whose return to town I'd read about in the university newsletter. If I caught them, I'd have grounds for divorce. The house would be Ethan's, but I'd control it as his guardian, ensuring the Thompsons couldn't touch it. Outside, the 1990s world hummed, kids on skateboards, radios blaring TLC. I was ready to outmaneuver Robert, using his greed against him to secure my children's freedom. The late July sun dipped low over my parents' Cleveland suburb, casting a golden glow across their backyard, where fireflies began to flicker. It was 1995 when kids traded baseball cards and families gathered around bulky TVs for Friends reruns. I sat on the porch of my parents' two-story house, a haven of warmth with the scent of my mom's apple pie wafting from the kitchen. My rebirth, a gift from a celestial voice urging me to rewrite my story, had brought me here to protect my children, Emily and Ethan, from the toxic grip of the Thompson family. Emily 10 played in the garden, her laughter contrasting with the fear she'd shown in the Thompsons' cramped Parma apartment. Now I needed to save Ethan, my 8-year-old son, before his grandparents' influence turned him into the spoiled man who'd called another woman mom in my past life. In that life, I'd died at 53, worn out from serving my husband Robert and his parents Margaret and George. They'd lived off my parents' wealth, a construction business, and a 4-bedroom rental house while dismissing them as new money. Robert, a literature professor at Cleveland State University, had charmed me at 18 with his scholarly air. Still, his disdain for my high school education and my parents' roots grew over time. His parents reinforced the era's patriarchal norms, favoring Ethan as the family heir while neglecting Emily, a girl they saw as temporary. I'd been complicit, showering Ethan with toys and attention, leaving Emily with hand-me-downs and scoldings. My rebirth allowed me to right those wrongs, starting with Ethan. I returned to the Thompsons' apartment, a dim space smelling cigarette smoke and Margaret's cooking oil. Robert was at the university, likely preparing for his associate professor promotion, while Margaret and George were out with Ethan. The apartment assigned by Robert's workplace symbolized my past compromises, giving them the main bedroom, while we squeezed into a smaller one. In 1995, in Ohio, women like me were expected to prioritize family duties over personal ambitions, and I'd obeyed, losing myself. I packed a bag for Ethan, determined to bring him to my parents' house. When Ethan returned, clutching a new comic book, his eyes were bright but guarded. "Mom, where's Emily?" he asked, his voice soft. I'd indulged him in my past life, creating a boy who grew distant and entitled. Margaret and George had doted on him, reinforcing the town's bias that boys were the future. "She's with Grandma Linda and Grandpa Tom," I said, kneeling beside him. "Want to join her? They've got new toys for you." His face lit up, then clouded. "Grandma Margaret says they don't like me. They only love Emily because she's a girl. They say Grandpa Tom's just a builder, not wise like Dad." My heart sank. Margaret's poison was already seeping in, turning Ethan against my parents. I hugged him gently. "That's not true, buddy. Grandma and Grandpa love you. They've got a big yard and new action figures waiting." His smile returned a spark of the boy he could be. "Really? Can we go now?" I nodded, promising to take him tomorrow. "What's it like with Grandma Margaret and Grandpa George?" I asked, probing. He shrugged. "They give me candy and let me watch TV, but they yell at Emily. They say she's a bother and shouldn't touch my stuff. I don't like it when they're mean to her." His words surprised me. He cared for his sister beneath the spoiling. There was hope for him yet. That evening, I sat with Ethan in the living room, watching a Power Rangers episode on the TV. "Ethan, do you like living here?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's okay, but I don't like it when Grandma yells. Emily's scared of her and I don't want her to be." His empathy, buried under Margaret's influence, gave me resolve. I'd take him to my parents' house where he could rediscover his kindness. My strategy was taking shape: secure the 4-bedroom house in Ethan's name to appease the Thompsons, gather evidence of Robert's infidelity with Laura Jenkins, and file for divorce. Ohio's 1995 laws required fault adultery would strengthen my case. My dad had hired Mike Callahan, a private investigator, to track Robert's late-night work trips. I called my parents to confirm Ethan's visit. My mom, Linda, said, "Bring him, Chloe. We'll show him love, not that Thompson nonsense." My dad added, "We've got your back. That house is yours if you need it." Their support was my anchor. The house, worth $200,000 now, would skyrocket in value by the 2000s, a fact my rebirth let me leverage. I'd urge them to buy more properties, ensuring our future. As I tucked Ethan in, I whispered, "Tomorrow we're going to a place where you'll be happy." He nodded, clutching his comic book, and I saw a chance to save him from becoming the man who'd forgotten me. The 1990s world outside hummed, kids on bikes, radios blaring Shania Twain. I was no longer the submissive wife. I was Chloe Davis, reborn with purpose, ready to rebuild my bond with Ethan and outmaneuver the Thompsons. Tomorrow, I'd take him to safety, one step closer to freedom. The August heat hung heavy over my parents' Cleveland suburb, where sprinklers hissed and kids sold lemonade on corners. It was 1995, a time of dial-up modems and Clueless in theaters, a world where families hid their flaws behind picket fences. I stood in the kitchen of my parents' 2-story house, watching Emily and Ethan chase each other in the backyard, their laughter a balm to my soul. My rebirth, granted by a celestial voice urging me to rewrite my story, had given me clarity I'd protect my children from the Thompsons' greed and toxicity. Emily 10 was already healing her confidence, growing under my parents' love. Ethan 8 had arrived yesterday, his eyes wide with wonder at the toys my parents bought him. My mission now was to secure our future and dismantle Robert's family. Back at the Thompsons' Parma apartment, I'd faced Robert's greed, demanding my parents' four-bedroom house without a cent from him. In my past life, I'd died at 53, exhausted from serving Robert, Margaret, and George, who lived off my parents' wealth while mocking them as uneducated. Robert, a professor at Cleveland State, had captivated me with his intellect, but his bias against my high school education and my parents' contractor success was evident. His parents reinforced the era's patriarchal norms, favoring Ethan while dismissing Emily. I'd secured the house in Ethan's name, demanding $50,000 from Robert for renovations, knowing he'd balk but eventually comply. I returned to the apartment, the air thick with tension. Margaret greeted me with a forced smile, a shift from her usual venom. "Chloe, you're back. Dinner's ready, your favorite lasagna." Her sudden kindness was a ploy. I'd overheard her and George discussing the house, eager to move in. Robert sat at the table, his scholarly air strained. "Chloe, my parents are on board with the $50,000, but why Ethan's name?" He asked, his tone smooth but calculated. In 1995, putting property in a child's name was unusual, especially a boy's, as families favored adult men. I leaned in, my voice firm. "My parents want to protect Ethan. The house is worth $200,000, $50,000 is fair. If you disagree, Dad's friend will buy it outright." George cleared his throat. "Chloe, it's not about the money. Back home, folks don't put houses in kids' names. People will talk." His concern for appearances was laughable. They'd never cared when leeching off my parents. I said, "My parents love Ethan, but they barely see him because you keep him here. They want him secure." Margaret jumped in, her voice sugary. "Why not take Ethan to your parents tomorrow? Let them bond during summer break." Exactly what I wanted. She thought it would sway my parents to give up the house. I agreed, taking Ethan back to my parents the next morning. Their home contrasted with the Thompsons' bright warm, with my mom's cookies and my dad's stories. Ethan ran to my dad, Tom, who lifted him onto his shoulders. "Look at my boy," Tom said, grinning. Emily joined them, showing Ethan her new dollhouse. "Mom, Ethan's nicer here," she whispered later. "He shares now." I hugged her. "He's learning, sweetheart. How do you feel about staying here?" She smiled. "It's the best. I don't want to go back to Grandma Margaret." Her clarity fueled my resolve. At my parents' kitchen table, I outlined my plan. "Mom, Dad, I'm divorcing Robert. I need evidence of his cheating. Mike Callahan is tracking him." My dad nodded. "Mike's good. He's already seen Robert at that old apartment late at night." My mom squeezed my hand. "We've got savings, Chloe. The house is yours, and we'll invest in more properties like you said." My rebirth foresight told me real estate would boom. I'd guide them to buy now, securing millions by 2010. I also researched at the library, confirming that Ohio's fault-based divorce laws favored adultery claims. If Mike caught Robert with Laura, I'd win custody. I played my part at the Thompsons, agreeing to the house transfer. Robert handed over $50,000 from his savings, a sum he'd hoarded, while my parents covered our expenses. The house was registered in Ethan's name, but as his guardian, I controlled it. Margaret's false sweetness continued, but I saw through her. I'd learned in my past life about her affair years ago, a scandal George never forgave. I'd use it later to unsettle them. For now, I focused on the kids, watching Ethan transform at my parents' polite sharing with Emily, free from Margaret's spoiling. The 1990s world spun on kids on rollerblades radios playing Boys to Men, but I was rewriting our future one calculated move at a time. The August air in Cleveland was thick with humidity, which clung to your skin as kids darted through sprinklers and radios blared Sheryl Crow's latest hit. It was 1995, a time of flip phones and Pulp Fiction VHS tapes, when suburban facades hid family secrets. I stood in the kitchen of our new four-bedroom house, a spacious suburban gem my parents had gifted us, now registered in my son Ethan's name. My rebirth, a celestial gift urging me to rewrite my story, had fueled my strategy to free my children Emily and Ethan from the Thompson family's toxic grip. Emily 10 and Ethan 8 were thriving at my parents' house, their laughter starkly contrasting the tension of the Thompsons' old Parma apartment. I was ready to expose Robert and his parents, Margaret and George, for their hypocrisy. In my past life, I died at 53, worn out from serving Robert, a literature professor at Cleveland State University, and his parents, who lived off my parents' wealth while mocking them as new money. Robert's charm had captivated me at 18, but his disdain for my high school education and my parents' contractor success grew over time. His parents reinforced the 1990s patriarchal norms favoring Ethan while dismissing Emily as a girl who'd marry out. I'd secured the house by demanding $50,000 from Robert, a sum he grudgingly paid, believing it would cement his family's status. But I controlled it as Ethan's guardian, and my plan was unfolding: expose Robert's infidelity with Laura Jenkins and dismantle his parents' influence. Back at the new house, Robert came home late, claiming evaluations at the university. His eyes, once warm, were distant, his scholarly air a mask for secrets. I suspected he was seeing Laura, his high school sweetheart, whose return I'd read about in the university newsletter. Margaret and George, meanwhile, were bitter about their smaller bedroom, which was smaller than Emily's. "This room's drafty," Margaret complained at dinner, her voice sharp. "We're old, Chloe. We deserve better." In 1995, elders often expected priority, but I saw through their greed. "The kids come first," I said firmly. "You managed in the old apartment's cracks. You'll survive." George muttered, ungrateful, but I held my ground. I'd learned in my past life about Margaret's affair years ago, a scandal that humiliated George when Robert was young. It was a weapon I'd used strategically. I planned to expose their dysfunction to Robert's boss, Dr. Helen Carter, whose husband led the promotion committee. Helen, a kind woman in her 50s, adored Emily and often visited. I invited her for dinner, knowing Margaret and George's tempers would flare. That evening, as Helen arrived, the house erupted. Margaret's voice screeched from their bedroom. "You were never home, George. I had to find someone else," George roared back. "You shamed me in front of our son, you cheat." The sound of a lamp crashing followed, unmistakable. Helen's eyes widened, her teacup trembling. I feigned shock, guiding her to the living room. "I'm so sorry, Helen. I didn't expect this." She patted my hand. "It's not your fault, Chloe, but it's troubling." As I cleaned up the broken glass later, Margaret sat on the sofa, her hair a mess, her face red from George's slap. George smoked on the balcony with scratch marks on his cheek. Robert returned, stunned. "What happened?" he demanded. I pulled him aside, my voice low. "Your parents fought in front of Helen. She heard everything: Margaret's affair, the violence. It isn't good for your promotion." Robert's face paled. "Why didn't you stop them?" "Why was Helen here?" I forced tears, a tactic I'd learned from 1990s soap operas. "I invited her for you, Robert. She loves Emily, and I thought it'd help your career. I didn't know they'd act like this." He softened, guilt flickering. "I'm sorry, Chloe. I overreacted." I nodded, hiding my satisfaction. Helen's report would tarnish his reputation, a key step in my plan. "I suggest that your parents visit their hometown for a bit. Out of sight, out of mind." Robert hesitated, then agreed. "I'll send them to Akron tomorrow. Once the promotion's secure, they'll return." The next morning, Margaret and George left, grumbling but compliant. The house felt lighter, quieter. Emily and Ethan stayed with my parents, safe from the chaos. Emily confided, "Mom, I'm glad they're gone. They were always mean to me." Ethan added, "Grandpa George scared me when he yelled." Their relief strengthened my resolve. My dad's investigator, Mike Callahan, tracked Robert's late nights, building evidence of his affair with Laura. I'd also urged my parents to invest the $50,000 in another property, knowing the 2000s boom would multiply their wealth. The 1990s world outside spun on kids trading Pokemon cards, radios playing TLC, but I was orchestrating a quiet revolution, exposing the Thompsons' hypocrisy, one calculated move at a time. The late August sun bathed Cleveland in a golden haze, the suburbs alive with back-to-school sales and the scent of barbecues. In 1995, a time of beepers and Waterworld and theater's secrets lurked behind closed doors. I stood in the living room of our new 4-bedroom house, its polished floors a far cry from the Thompsons' cramped Parma apartment. My rebirth, a celestial mandate to rewrite my story, had driven me to protect Emily and Ethan from Robert and his parents' greed. The house was peaceful, with Margaret and George temporarily in Akron, but Robert's late nights were growing bolder. I was ready to uncover his betrayal and secure our freedom. In my past life, I'd collapsed at 53, exhausted from serving Robert, a Cleveland State professor, and his parents, who lived off my parents' wealth, a construction business, and this very house, while mocking them as uneducated. Robert's charm had won me at 18, but his disdain for my high school diploma and my parents' roots revealed his true nature. He saw himself as an intellectual above my common family, a bias common in 1990s academia. His parents reinforced this, favoring Ethan while dismissing Emily, aligning with the era's view that girls were less valuable. I'd secured the house in Ethan's name, forcing Robert to pay $50,000, which my parents were investing in another property, leveraging my foresight of the 2000s real estate boom. Robert's absences were now blatant. He'd return after midnight, claiming department meetings his scholarly air fraying. I suspected Laura Jenkins, his high school sweetheart, whose return to Cleveland I'd noted in a university newsletter. In my past life, he married her after my death, living off my parents' wealth. My dad's investigator, Mike Callahan, had photos of Robert entering the old Parma apartment, which he refused to sell. Mike reported that he was there every evening. No solid proof of cheating yet, but he's with a woman, blonde, petite, looks educated. It had to be Laura. I planned to catch him in the act, knowing Ohio's 1995 divorce laws favored fault-based grounds like adultery. Custody of Emily and Ethan depended on it. I visited the library, confirming legal precedents, photographic evidence, and witnesses could secure my case. My parents, Tom and Linda, backed me. "We've got savings," my mom said. "Hire the best lawyer." My dad added that Mike was close to nailing him. "We'll get you out." Their support and the house in Ethan's name under my control gave me leverage. One evening, as Robert left for work, I called Mike. "He's headed to the apartment. Meet me there with Dad and his friends." I left Emily and Ethan with my parents, their faces bright. "Mom." "I love it here," Emily said. "No one yells like Grandma Margaret." Ethan nodded. "I don't want to go back. Dad's always gone and I miss you." Their words fueled me. Both wanted to stay with me, not Robert. I drove to Parma, the 1990s streets quiet, lit by streetlights and the glow of tube TVs through windows. At the apartment, my dad and his construction buddies, tall, burly men, waited in the shadows. Mike handed me a spare key I'd kept from our old lease. The bedroom window flickered, then went dark. My heart pounded as we climbed the stairs. Inside, chaos erupted. Robert's voice shouted, "Who's there?" as my dad's friend Joe dragged him out shirtless, his face pale. In a silk robe, Laura shrieked, her delicate beauty marred by panic. Neighbors gathered, whispering their 1990s sensibilities, shocked by the scandal. "That's Professor Thompson," one gasped. I faced Robert, my voice cold. "It's over, Robert," Laura stammered. "Chloe, it's not what you think." But Mike's photos, Robert and Laura entering the apartment multiple nights, were damning. My dad's glare silenced Robert, who slumped defeated. The fallout was swift. The university, bound by 1990s moral codes, suspended Robert pending a review. His promotion was dead, his reputation ruined. Back at my parents' house, I hugged Emily and Ethan. "We're staying here," I said. Emily smiled. "Good. Dad didn't care about us." Ethan added, "I want to be with you and Grandpa." Their choice was clear. I met with a lawyer, Sarah Bennett, who reviewed Mike's evidence. "Adultery's a strong case," she said. "You'll get custody and keep the house." My parents' investment in another property was underway, securing our future. The 1990s world moved on, kids on skateboards, radios playing Mariah Carey, but I'd turned the tables, exposing Robert's betrayal and paving the way for our new life. The September breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass through the open windows of my parents' Cleveland home, where the suburbs pulsed with the rhythm of 1995 kids on rollerblades, radios blasting Smashing Pumpkins, and families prepping for back to school. I stood in the living room, its floral curtains swaying, watching Emily 10 and Ethan 8 draw with crayons at the coffee table. My rebirth, a celestial mandate to rewrite my story, had guided me through a summer of calculated moves to free my children from the Thompson family's toxic hold. Robert, my husband, had been caught with Laura Jenkins, his affair exposed in a scandal that shattered his career. Now I was ready to finalize our escape through divorce, securing custody, and our future. In my past life, I'd died at 53, worn out from serving Robert, a literature professor at Cleveland State University, and his parents, Margaret and George. They'd lived off my parents' wealth, a construction business, and a 4-bedroom house while mocking them as new money. Robert's charm had won me at 18, but his disdain for my high school education and my parents' roots grew masked by his scholarly persona. His parents reinforced the era's patriarchal norms, favoring Ethan as the heir while dismissing Emily as a girl who'd marry out. I'd been complicit, spoiling Ethan and neglecting Emily, a mistake I'd corrected by securing the house in Ethan's name, forcing Robert to pay $50,000, which my parents invested in another property, leveraging my foresight of the 2000s real estate boom. Robert's downfall was swift. After we caught him with Laura in the old Parma apartment, neighbors' whispers spread, and the university, bound by 1990s moral standards, fired him for conduct unbecoming. His associate professor's dream was dust, and his reputation was ruined in a town where academia prized propriety. He came crawling back, knocking on my parents' door one humid evening, his tie askew, his eyes desperate. "Chloe, I messed up," he pleaded, kneeling on the porch. "Give me another chance for the kids." I'd have softened, swayed by his promises in my past life. I felt nothing but contempt for the man who'd dismissed me and my children. I stepped outside, closing the door to shield Emily and Ethan. "It's over, Robert," I said, my voice steady. "You chose Laura. You ignored our kids. There's no going back." His face crumpled, but I saw the calculation behind his tears, a man trying to salvage his comfort, not our family. Emily peeked through the window, her eyes fierce. "Mom, don't let him in," she whispered later. "He never cared when I was scared of Grandma Margaret." Ethan nodded, clutching a toy car. "Dad was always gone." "I want to stay with you and Grandpa." Their clarity, rare for kids so young in 1995 when loyalty to parents was expected, solidified my resolve. I'd hired Sarah Bennett, a sharp divorce lawyer my dad's contacts recommended. Ohio's 1995 laws favored fault-based grounds, and Mike Callahan's photos, Robert and Laura entering the apartment multiple nights, were ironclad evidence of adultery. Sarah reviewed them in her downtown office, her desk piled with legal pads. "This is strong," she said. "Courts here don't take kindly to infidelity. You'll get custody, and the house stays in Ethan's name under your control." My parents' financial backing covered her fees, a luxury many women in 1995 lacked when divorce often left mothers struggling. Margaret and George, back in Akron, objected to my keeping Ethan, claiming he was their boy. But Sarah was confident they have no legal standing. The kid's preference and Robert's affair seal it. The court date was set for October. I prepared Emily and Ethan, sitting them on my parents' couch. "Kids, Mommy and Daddy won't live together anymore," I said gently. Emily hugged me. "I want to stay with you, Mom. This house feels like home." Ethan added, "Me too." Grandpa Tom tells better stories than Grandpa George. Their choice, bold for an era when children's voices were rarely heard in court, matched the evidence. My parents, Tom and Linda, were my rock. "We've got savings," my mom said, her hand on mine. "You and the kids will never want." My dad added that $50,000 isn't a new property. It'll grow like you said. My foresight of the real estate boom ensured their investment would secure millions by 2010. As the hearing approached, I organized our new life. The 4-bedroom house, now ours, was a fresh start. Emily's room filled with dolls, Ethan's with action figures. I enrolled them in a nearby school, its 1990s classrooms buzzing with chalk dust and overhead projectors. I also worked part-time at my dad's construction office, answering phones to build my independence, a rarity for women in our town. The 1990s world moved on blockbuster rentals, Alanis Morissette on the radio, but I'd secured our freedom, outmaneuvering the Thompsons with evidence, law, and love. The crisp September air swept through my parents' Cleveland backyard, where the leaves turned gold, signaling the end of summer 1995. The suburbs hummed with the simplicity of the era, kids trading pogs, families tuning into ER on boxy TVs, and neighbors chatting over fences. I stood on the porch of our 4-bedroom house, now officially ours, watching Emily, 10, and Ethan, 8, play tag with my dad, Tom, their laughter echoing through the garden. My mom, Linda, called from the kitchen, the scent of her pot roast drifting out. My rebirth, a celestial gift to rewrite my story, had led me here, free from the Thompsons, surrounded by love, with a future secured for my children. In my past life, I'd died at 53, broken by years of serving Robert and his parents, Margaret and George, who'd leached off my parents' wealth, a construction business, and this house while sneering at their new money roots. Robert's professorial charm had won me at 18, but his contempt for my high school education and my parents' success defined our marriage. His parents echoed the 1990s patriarchal bias, favoring Ethan while dismissing Emily. I'd been complicit, spoiling Ethan and neglecting Emily, a mistake I'd undone by securing the house in Ethan's name and exposing Robert's affair with Laura Jenkins. The divorce was finalized last week. In the Cuyahoga County Courthouse, a stern judge reviewed Mike Callahan's photos of Robert and Laura, his face grim. Ohio's 1995 laws punished adultery harshly, especially for a professor whose university valued moral standing. Robert lost his job, his reputation, and any claim to custody. Emily and Ethan's statements bravely given to a court counselor sealed it. "I want to live with Mom," Emily said, her voice steady. "She loves us." Ethan added, "Dad was never there." "Grandma and Grandpa Davis are my family. The judge granted me full custody and the house was under my control as Ethan's guardian." Margaret and George back in Akron had no legal ground to fight and their greed was exposed. I'd rebuilt my bond with my children. Emily, once timid, now radiated confidence, her room a haven of books and dolls. "Mom, I feel safe here," she told me, sketching in her notebook. Ethan, once spoiled, was kinder, sharing toys with Emily. "Grandpa Tom taught me how to plant flowers," he said proudly. My parents' love had transformed them, erasing the Thompsons' influence. My dad's investment of Robert's $50,000 into a second property was appreciated, and my foresight of the 2000s boom guided their wealth. I worked part-time at my dad's office, learning bookkeeping to support us, a step toward independence rare for women in 1995's conservative suburbs. The Thompsons were gone. Robert, jobless, had moved to Akron with his parents, Laura nowhere in sight. Margaret's affair, exposed during their fight, haunted them, their reputation tarnished in a town where gossip spread fast. I felt no pity. My past life's pain had taught me justice. My parents, Tom and Linda, were my anchor. "You're our girl," my mom said, hugging me. "We're proud of you," my dad grinned. Those Thompsons got what they deserved. Their love and the house they'd secured for us was my foundation. I felt peace as I watched Emily and Ethan chase fireflies, their giggles blending with the crickets' song. The 1990s world was my canvas, simple, free of smartphones, full of porch swings and cassette tapes. I'd rewritten our story, trading the Thompsons' toxicity for a life of love. The future was bright with possibility, rooted in the family I'd reclaimed. Happiness was this: my children's laughter, my parents' warmth, and a dawn I'd fought for.